Hi everyone, my name is Edli. Currently probably very short. I'm an informatics student studying at Technical University of Munich. Thank you so much for being here. And it's wonderful getting to know everyone throughout the past 2 days. And I'm honestly like honored and grateful to have shared the space with all of you. And I mean, it's still not over, but it already feels like it is. Either way, I would like to keep this very brief. This panel is called The Rebuilding of Palestinian Higher Education. I think the title is self-explanatory, and I feel also the importance of having it in this academic boycott conference is as such. Throughout the last 2 years, we have been talking, throughout the last 2 days, we have been talking a lot about the complicity of our own academic institutions on the ongoing genocide of Palestinian people in Gaza and how we can organize to put an end to this complicity. But there is no denying that the past, especially the past 2 years, but we will talk about probably also historically, the devastation of the settler colonialism in Palestine, specifically on education sites, has been tremendous. And I feel there is a special responsibility, especially on the West, as I would say, if not direct, indirect perpetrators of what has been going on to help on rebuilding these institutions and bringing it back on its feet. And this has also, politically, it's also very important because we have been talking a lot about like how Palestinian education institutions are central in our central sites of producing resistance. And this is also why they having the amount of ferocious attack that they have been witnessing. But without further ado, I'd like to firstly introduce our first panelist and speaker. So probably a short bio. Dr. Mohamed Alakad is a Palestinian scholar, interpreter, and researcher based in Malaysia with over 15 years of experience in conference interpreting and higher education. Currently, he serves as a resident scholar at the Hashim Sani Center for Palestine Studies, University Malaya, Malaysia. His work focuses on Palestinian scholarship in diaspora, translation, and interpreting studies, and the role of international academic solidarity in sustaining Palestinian higher education. He has been actively involved in research, teaching, and institutional initiatives that support Palestinian scholars, academic collaboration, and knowledge production beyond Palestine. Additionally, he is the founder and CEO of the Asian Federation of Translators and Interpreters Malaysia. Dr. Mohamed Alakad will be presenting on Malaysia's historical role in offering refuge and academic opportunities to Gazan scholars. The presentation will highlight the important work of the Hashim Sani Center for Palestine Studies in Kuala Lumpur, particularly its role in supporting and amplifying scholarly contributions from the Palestinian diaspora. Drawing on these experiences, the talk will invite us to think about how such models can inform the development of stronger and more sustainable infrastructures of academic solidarity with Palestinian institutions today. Without further ado, Mohammed, the floor is yours.
Hi, how are you all? Let me just mute this phone.
We're doing great. I think probably, I don't know if you can see the room, but
So thank you so much. Thank you, Idli, for this wonderful presentation. So can I start? Share the presentation?
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you can share the presentation, or do you want me to share the slide? Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm sharing here. Okay, can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, that's perfect. So today we are going to speak about rebuilding Palestinian higher education and the role of Malaysian solidarity and how Malaysia actually was a role model in terms of supporting the current situation in Gaza. And since the beginning, like since 2001, 2000, to Malaysia was played a very important role. So first of all, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you very much to the organizers for organizing this wonderful Academic Boycott Now conference. And thank you everyone for attending this session. So today I will be discussing the current state of Palestinian higher education and the scale of damage that it has experienced. The practical equation of how academic recovery can take place. So my focus for today will be on the international collaboration with particular attention to the role played by Malaysian government through state institutions, universities, and civil society in sustaining the Palestinian scholarship during the prolonged crisis. So far, but let me just, before I speak about this one, let me just mention something. So I'm speaking here not only as an academic staff or academic a person, but also as a Palestinian scholar and genocide survivor who lived through the first 7 months of the current genocide, and as someone whose intellectual life has been shaped by displacement, loss, and persistent struggle to keep education alive under conditions designed to destroy it. So far in Gaza, as we can see, all 12 major universities in Gaza has been partially or completely damaged, actually. So far, no any major university or government university in Gaza is still standing. Nothing, all become or turned into rubble. So Scholasticide term, as we all heard, just starting of the current genocide in Gaza, we start hearing about the Scholasticide term. Actually, before the Gaza genocide, for me and many of the Palestinians, we never heard about this term. So what is this term? This term actually, it describes the deliberate targeting of the educational infrastructure to cripple a society future. So over 90,000 Palestinian student university or university students have had their education abruptly halted, creating a massive academic vacuum among the Palestinian generation for the past 3 years. Imagine all our friends, our neighbors, our family members, for the past 3 years, until now, they never attend any classrooms. They never been to school. They never been to university. Their life totally abrupted for 3 years. So the loss include not just building, but also irresponsible and irreplaceable research, archives, lives of prominent academics. More than 500 academic staff has been deliberately erased and intentionally we're targeting. Reconstruction will require decades and decades of international cooperation and massive financial investment. So in terms of the challenges facing Palestinian higher education, movement restriction, checkpoints not only in Gaza, but more than 700 checkpoints in the West Bank. So there are some people who were asking, like, why the Gaza war started. Actually, the Gaza war didn't start in 2023. It started 77 years back. So the genocide is starting from 1948, not from 2023. But no one were witnessing, no one were looking at this. So the explosion of the volcano, as we can explain it or as we can imagine it, it started in 2023. But actually, the genocide and the killing and the checkpoint and the siege, long time ago. So in terms of military operation attacks on campuses, 12 major universities damaged since 2023. This is only the major university. And more than 25 private universities has been totally destroyed. Infrastructure destruction, resources scarcity, electricity, not even 1 single hour per day in Gaza. There is no electricity at all. So most of the electricity, as we can call it electricity in Gaza, is not by the electricity power, but actually it's human-made electrical generators, or sometimes they use the destroyed solar panels, which were before the genocide started. There were many of the solar panels on several of the houses and several of the government institutions and several of the university roofs. There were solar panels. So after the Israeli destroyed these universities and these buildings, these entities, so there were some solar panels which partially destroyed. So the people try start fixing these solar panels in order to secure at least a few hours of electricity through these things. So limited internet connectivity, of course, digital resources, academic isolation from a global community. So as we can see that what is going in Gaza, of course, it's nothing to do with collateral damage. It's actually scholasticide. It's a clear scholasticide. So it's a systematic destruction of educational infrastructure, academic communities, and intellectual future. So the reality in Gaza is universities and in West Bank and Gaza have moved beyond operating under siege to facing total erasure. So it's an attack on Palestinian presence, Palestinian identity, Palestinian culture, Palestinian epistemic agency, not only on the Palestinian fighters, or as Hamas, or as Israel called them, the terrorists or whatever. So nothing to do with Hamas fighter or Al Jihad fighter, nothing to do with them. Actually, it's an attack on the Palestinian identity, Palestinian epistemic agency, on every single Palestinian. So university bombed, libraries and laboratories reduced to rubble, professors and students killed or displaced. The erosion of generation of knowledge, which never happened in the history before. It has been happening in Gaza since 2023, up to date. Israel, on weekly basis, send people under the table or undercover to some European countries. Last few months, all of us witnessed when Israel sent around 200 people to South Africa. In the shadow, no one knows. Even South African country, people and the president never heard about it until they found the Palestinian in their country. So what is the lost generation of knowledge, carefully built under extraordinary hardship, have been erased in moments. Archive, libraries, physical repositories of history are all gone. Researchers, student voices, totally silenced. Continuity of disruption of academic lineage. So here we can see Palestinian higher education has never existed under normal condition. Yet what we are witnessing today goes far beyond constraint. So here I have gathered 3 pillars of true rebuilding plan for Gaza. First, restoring academic autonomy by ensuring institutions that can function without external coercion or military interference. So we are not looking for a military or external interference in our education system to reform the system as they want or as they wish. We want to rebuild our own institution as it was, reclaiming epistemic sovereignty, ensuring Palestinians are not only recipients of aids, but producers of knowledge. And by the way, the highest number of educated people in the world, according to the or per square feet is in Gaza. More than 97 or 98% of the Gazan population are educated. Reconcentering Palestinian narrative. This is the third pillar, which by protecting research, tradition, and curricula from erosion within scholarship. The global goal is liberation, not just reconstruction. This is what we are looking for. Diaspora as a bridge, not a substitute. So people were asking why Palestinians start leaving their countries or start leaving, especially the Gaza Strip, in the few months of the genocide. This is not a kind of substitute for them, but no, as a kind of keeping and maintaining the identity, as of a way to rebuild the country, to rebuild the new generation who's going back to the country sooner or later to redevelop and refurbish the country. So institutional memory, displaced scholars carry institutional memory, research continuity, and pedagogical tradition. So our responsibility is to speak where voices have been forcibly silenced. So the objective of the Palestinian diaspora, safeguard intellectual legacies, advocate for protection, and prepare for revival on Palestinian terms. Academic boycott is not anti-knowledge, it's a pro-justice. This is what some of the Israelis try to spread, which is by making academic boycott as anti-Semitism, and also they call it as a kind of anti-knowledge, that they are against the knowledge. That's true, 100% false. That's not true at all. So the academic boycott is a refusal to normalize oppression under banner of scholarly exchange. This is what they want. So in terms of Malaysia role, here Malaysia plays a kind of model of ethical engagement. Malaysia role deserve particular attention as a proof of concept for how the global South can lead where the North fails. So the key characteristics in terms of Malaysian playing a major role in rebuilding and reshaping the future of the Palestinian institutional support is government and systematic, not just individual. Universities act as sanctuaries for displaced Palestinian students and scholars. Palestine is framed as an educational responsibility in the Malaysian government framework, not just as a humanitarian charity case. Structural solidarity in practice. So what we need to do and what Malaysia is doing. Scholarships and refuge, opening university to Palestinian researchers and scholars, accepting more than 600 Palestinian medical students to study for free and to continue their study for free after being abducted for several years in Gaza, to come and to study in Malaysian university for free until they finish their degrees. Institutionalization. So in terms of institutionalization, academic scholarity is embedded in university and university policy, demonstrating that support for Palestine coexists with high academic standard. So this model shows that higher education can be guided by conscience without waiting for approval from dominant academic powers. In terms of Hashim Sani Center for Palestinian Studies, which is the first academic center in Southeast Asia, that allocated in the number 1 university in Malaysia and number 10 or 10th university in Southeast Asia. So first of its kind in Asia, dedicated academic center for Palestinian studies, founded in 2022, established by Norma Hashim at University of Malaya. Vision of the center is to be a leading center in Asia for Palestinian studies. The mission of this center is expanding knowledge to achieve freedom, justice, and quality. Some of the activities and objectives for the center were research support, individual and collaborative research in Palestinian studies, academic programs, short courses, conferences, seminars on Palestine, visiting the scholars and the professor program, host writers, artists, academics from Palestine and globally, building network and connection with the scholars in University of Malaya and beyond. Here are some of the books that were published just in the last few years by the center. The Prisoner Diaries, Dreaming of Freedom, A Shared Struggle, Displaced in Gaza, and many, many more. Also, the center has initiated its official journal in Palestinian Studies, which called the International Journal of Palestinian Studies, and has published its first issue. And now we are preparing for the next issue soon. So Malaysia leading regional coordination through the Kuala Lumpur Action Plan, which was in last July 2025, cooperation among East Asian countries for Palestine or Palestinian development, meeting established a strategic framework for recovery. So the Kuala Lumpur Action Plan, we're focusing on delivering and diversifying assistance means and expanding the base of international support for Palestine. Diplomatic leadership, leverage Malaysian influence with ASEAN and OIC to keep Palestinian education on the global agenda. In terms of financial support, direct financial aid, scholarship, ensure academic continuity, Malaysia has allocated 3.87 million USD to support Palestinian students, almost 50 million USD total government funding and the pledge to Gaza and to help in rebuilding Gaza. The Malaysian government currently funds almost 600 Palestinian student tuition fees for over of their programs, which enrolled in local public universities. Institutional support, University Tenaga Malaysia has pioneering full fee waivers for a new Palestinian enrollment, and many, many other universities, whether private and or government. So in terms of NGOs, Malaysian NGOs bridge the gap between policy and the ground reality, which here we have many of the Malaysian NGOs are pioneering in supporting and sending whether medical aids or financial aid or humanitarian aid to Gaza and to West Bank also, not only to Gaza. My Care Malaysia, which is Humanitarian Care Malaysia, Mercy Malaysia, ISCO, and many, many others. Also, there are one major NGO, which is Viva Palestina. A global academic solidarity must move beyond symbolic gesture. This is what we are looking for. So twinning programs and endowment create long-term institutional resilience. Academic twinning allow Palestinian students to earn degrees from international partners while remaining in their communities, bypassing physical blockade and ensuring academic continuity, which some of the European countries start doing this. international advocacy, global academic communities are urged to mobilize resources and advocate for the protection of education institutions, higher education endowment, and institutional tuning. In terms of a global academic obligation, rebuilding is not a Palestinian task alone. The destruction of any part of a global academic community is an injury to the whole. We must ensure universities are not remembered as silent witness to destruction, but as an active participant in rebuilding. So, 3 calls to action for rebuilding Gaza and also protecting the Palestinian scholars. First, protect Palestinian scholars everywhere, establish fellowships, visiting positions, and remote teaching collaboration that do not depolitize their reality. Refuse complicity, support academic boycott initiatives, challenge institutional partnership that normalize violence, reimagine solidarity, move beyond the statement, commit to sustained material and institutional support following the Malaysian example. Education as an act of resistance. Palestinian higher education has survived decades of siege, not because conditions were favorable, but because education itself became an act of resistance. To build now requires courage from all of us who claim to believe in justice. So, toward a just intellectual future, let's ensure that we are not silent witnesses. We are not silent witnesses, but active architects of a university system that value dignity as much as it values data. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Mohammed. It was really good. Thanks a lot. I think, now we're going to move to the second talk before we have a chance then to ask some questions from the audience. So the second panelist is Professor Hannah Kinsler. Hannah Kinsler is a professor of global health in the Department of Global Health and Social Medicine and co-director of the ESRC Center for Society and Mental Health at King's College London. She investigates how systemic violence and complex emergencies intersect with health and mental health outcomes in the occupied Palestinian territory, Kosovo, and among refugees in the UK. She conducts research on the mental health impacts of war and trauma on survivors, on what it means for persons with severe mental illness to live and participate in their respective communities, and on humanitarian and mental health interventions in fragile states. She is also co-founder of the Refugee Mental Health and Place Network. Thanks a lot for joining. Professor Hannah Kinsler's presentation is called Working in Partnership, Principles for More Equitable and Ethical Research Under Settler Colonialism, Military Occupation, and Genocide. I'm sorry, I want to present this correctly. Just, you could give me 1 second. Yes, the presentation from Professor Hannah Kinsler is going to be called Working in Partnership, Principles for More Equitable and Ethical Research During Genocide and Under Settler Colonialism, Military Occupation, and Apartheid. I'm sorry. And this presentation is work that Professor Hannah Kinsler has done with Dr. Wiyam Hamoudeh from Birzeit University. The presentation reflects on over a decade of collaborative research between researchers at Birzeit University in the occupied Palestinian territory and King's College London in the UK to identify key features of more equitable and ethical research practice, drawing on work conducted under conditions of settler colonialism, illegal military occupation, and structural inequality, we outline 6 guiding principles: accountability, mutual respect and care, dignity-centered ethics, opening up spaces, listening and learning, and speaking out, illustrated through concrete examples from health research in Palestine. We argue that while these principles, or better, the presentation argues that while these principles cannot dismantle global power asymmetries, they foster higher quality, locally grounded research, durable partnerships, and a form of knowledge production that remains accountable to communities and the political determinants of health. Yeah, without further ado, thank you so much, Hannah, for joining. And yeah, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the kind introduction. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I'll share my screen. Can you see my screen? I think you might be seeing my entire laptop here. Let me see how to do this. Can you see it? Okay, cool. So I'll just jump in. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mohammed, for this important talk. It's very humbling to follow you. And I hope that I'm sort of building on what it is that you have said. So again, also, thank you very much for the invitation to present at this important conference on academic boycott. As you were just told, this presentation is based on my joint work with Dr. Wiam Hamoudeh at Birzeit University in occupied Palestine. Wiam and I, strongly believe that boycott, divestment, and sanctions of Israeli and other institutions guilty of violating international humanitarian law is of utmost importance to achieve an end to genocide, settler colonialism, military occupation, and apartheid. We also believe that BDS is not enough. It rings somewhat hollow if we don't also think about how to work equitably and ethically in partnership with those dehumanized, oppressed, and marginalized. I'm often quite surprised to learn that those engaged in BDS, also at my university, have no connections to Palestinian students, scholars, or researchers in Palestine, whether in Gaza, the West Bank, or 48. And this makes me think that partnership working is way more challenging to achieve than refusing to work with perpetrators, in that it demands to question and dismantle power structures that have benefited us over generations in such a way that we might not even notice these sort of structures and ways in which we are involved in this most of the time. We're all contributors, those in the so-called West, whether consciously or not, to a structurally unequal, racist, and colonial system. This includes me, and this includes you. Equitable and ethical partnership working is often the very first thing that is forgotten about in crisis situations by humanitarian aid workers, researchers, academics, and students. Médecins Sans Frontières is the latest example, claiming that, and I quote from their social media post, Israel has knowingly given MSF and our Palestinian colleagues an impossible choice. Either we provide staff information or abandon hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who need vital medical care. Considering this an impossible choice is reflective of a colonial mindset that considers local staff as resource rather than co-leads. It considers them as cannon fodder, given that Israel's genocide against Palestinians has led to the highest number of health workers killed and detained in a single conflict in modern history. Crisis situations, whether a genocide, a war, an earthquake, have long been fertile grounds for interventions or interventionists and researchers who work and think, or who think it opportune to consider absolutely everything that they have to offer an emergency intervention. there are emergency interventions, but a lot of that we have to offer as scholars and researchers is simply not. I'm sorry. Emergency interventions are driven by what Calhoun has called an emergency imaginary. According to him, such emergency imaginaries assume notions of suddenness, unpredictability, surprise, and shock. They are believed to demand urgent responses rather than careful political and economic analysis. Such emergency imaginaries have been shown to create exceptional opportunities for research and interventions in contexts of crisis. In the current context of Gaza, the destruction of the education system is a case in point. Israel has damaged or destroyed 100% of schools and universities in Gaza, as we just heard. The systemic nature of the Scholasticide not only threatens the survival of higher education in Gaza, but has catastrophic consequences for wider sectors that rely on its teaching, training, knowledge, and research capacities. The knee-jerk reactions, often, but not always well-intentioned, are often to rebuild Gaza's education system in whatever they see fit, threatening to replace existing structures following tried and tested colonial agendas. And Mohammed has alluded to that. Examples include, for example, the proposal for a new technical university of reconstruction in Gaza. One envisioned to train students from all over the world, but also from locally in Gaza, in skills to help rebuild Gaza's shattered infrastructure and economy after what they call the war, I would say the genocide. It would use post-war Gaza as a living laboratory for reconstruction-focused education and intervention. Critics, including myself, argue it could undermine, or it will undermine, existing Palestinian universities and needs to be carefully aligned with Gaza-led recovery effort. So such knee-jerk reactions, but also include online learning platforms or courses with medical or other curricula that were never asked for or wanted. It starts to amount to a kind of resource dumping without quality control that leaves instructors in Gaza struggling to make heads and tails from this material. Much of the material actually ends up being unused. I am imagining it sort of as a heap of piled up online lectures. Such initiatives conveniently ignore that despite the destruction of buildings and facilities, together with a huge loss of life and mass displacement of students and academics, the universities have continued to function. By necessity, the medical faculties, that's my own work, that's why I referred to this, have continued to train medical and nursing students via online learning platforms, as well as conducting examination and graduating students, as you can see here in the picture. Clinical placements remain vital to the continued functioning of the health sector under siege and bombardment. In October 2025, the leading universities in Gaza reopened admission for Tawjihi high school graduates for the first time in 2 years. A cohort described as the Phoenix generation. Crucially, health research in Gaza continues to be conducted and published, informing medical interventions and education in the most of extreme circumstances. The marginalization or exclusion of local experts is also evident in research spaces, where some have noted extractive practices and inequalities in relationships, particularly with scholars from the global north. This is not only true for well-established and arrogant researchers and academics, but also for students. On a monthly basis, if not more, I receive emails from graduate students wanting to embark on a PhD journey, proposing projects such as exploring the mental health of Palestinian children survivors of the genocide, or investigating the impact of the war on mental health and available health support, and the like. There's so many. I mean, really, what do they think will they find when exploring the mental health of children in such situations? I mean, what? what that they cannot imagine. Is this really what the children need? Do they really think it a good idea to advance their academic careers on the back of people who are in this very moment being genocided? Really? Think again. I'm sure that this is all well-meaning, but I find these emails jarring. They make me actually really angry most of the time. This is not allyship. This is not solidarity. This is structural violence driven by an educational industry which is fundamentally colonialist and racist. So Dr. Hamoudeh, Wiam, and I believe that different modus operandus is not only necessary, but also possible. Based on over a decade of partnership working between the Institute of Community and Public Health, ICPH, at Birzeit University and myself from King's, key features for more equitable working have evolved, and this includes accountability, mutual respect and care, an ethics of practice that centers dignity, opening up spaces, listening, learning, and understanding, and speaking out. And I will go through each very briefly. Accountability. So to work equitably in research and intervention requires accountability to each other, to our values, to ethics, and the communities and participants that have engaged us in our work. Professor Rita Giacoman, a well-known, very famous public health scholar in Palestine, in her articles, she shows how the Institute of Community and Public Health took this accountability seriously from the beginning. Back in the 1980s, their research was explicitly done in the service of society. Researchers partnered with local community-based organizations, trained village health workers, and focused on political, environmental, and social conditions shaping health, not just biomedical outcomes. Later, they described this work as work done in reverse, because practice came before theory. Rather than starting with the established literature, which was often inaccessible anyways, their day-to-day work shaped how they thought and built knowledge. Importantly, this approach gave them the confidence to produce evidence that was locally relevant, ethically grounded, and accountable to the community's needs, not global academic standards, even though it was of high academic standard. Even though this work was marginalized internationally, it functioned as a form of resistance and a decolonized way of working before such language became popular in the global north. Second, mutual respect and care. We believe that equitable working starts with genuinely acknowledging and respecting what each person brings to the table, especially in crisis-affected settings. At ICPH, this meant carefully building relationships and caring relationships with collaborations over time. Researchers worked with researchers across the region, as well as the global north. And one major outcome of this collaboration was the creation of the Lancet Palestinian Health Alliance. And we will come to this later again. I will just talk a little bit about this now. The alliance helped to build research capacity. It was driven by Palestinians in Palestine and in the diaspora, amplified Palestinian scholarship, and published rigorous work at a time when many major journals considered it too political. Through this allyship, often grounded also in long-term friendship, new locally relevant ways of understanding health emerged. Researchers developed subjective health measures, focusing on the lived experience, like humiliation, deprivation, insecurity, distress, and more recently, uncertainty. These tools are now used not only in Palestine, but the wider region. Third, an ethics of practice that centers dignity. Even in the most urgent of situations, we can't compromise on treating people with dignity and respect. This matters especially when working with marginalized groups, but also so-called North-South partnerships, where people can feel excluded, dismissed, or silenced. In our work with people with severe mental illness in Palestine, we learned that urgency doesn't mean rushing. Instead, we slowed down to listen carefully and co-produce work that actually mattered to participants. One example is this illustrated storybook here, which is called Get to Know Us, Our Lives with Mental Illness in the Palestinian Community. This approach helps shift the focus towards community inclusion and dialogue. It is grounded in participatory action methods, human rights, and collaboration across households, communities, services, and national policy. The key lesson here is ethical work takes time, and that time is essential. Fourth, opening up spaces. Here, creating spaces for equity may be one of the hardest part of this work, because it means confronting structures that produce and maintain power inequalities. In our research, teaching, and training, we have chosen to follow a path that involves unlearning colonial ways of thinking, valuing local languages and knowledges, and documenting struggles as they are lived on the ground. We don't claim that we're dismantling these structures, but we are very aware of them. They're just really strong. In practice, though, as you can imagine, this is not easy at all. Researchers from the global north often avoid direct conversations about inequality, while colleagues in the global south may hesitate to speak up, worried that critique could threaten funding, resources, and also vital partnerships. The ensuing silence can undermine shared goals, equitable partnerships, and also research quality. It just leads to bad research. That's the bottom line. Opening up space for more equitable ways of working often feels like an uphill battle, but I believe it is a battle worth fighting. 5, listening, learning, and understanding. To coexist on equal footing requires us to listen, to learn, and to understand a plurality of knowledge, experiences, and histories that we bring to our work in conflict-affected settings, including genocide. It involves dialogical engagement, that is, it requires a recognition that knowledge and skills exchanges are two-way streets or multiple-way streets, where differently positioned actors are willing to learn from each other. It also requires humility and focuses on research that produces learning growth for all. Too often, researchers and practitioners from so-called global north countries dismiss the expertise and know-how from their global south counterparts and fail to strengthen their own capacity when it comes to strengthening their cultural competency, research design and methods, pedagogical capacities, and access to opportunities for mentorship. So they're losing out themselves. Finally, speaking out. These principles, mutual respect and care, dignity, listening, learning, and understanding, and so on, they amount to very little if we're not willing to speak truth to power. We have a deep-rooted commitment to speak out against genocide and crimes against humanity, illegal occupation, siege, and apartheid. We speak out as human beings first and foremost, while using research to bolster our demands with evidence, even as it means risking our careers, promotions, invitations, and other kinds of opportunities. Conversely, silence on these issues is a move away from these values and would be a cause of distrust and the possible dissolution of our working relationships. As researchers, we are convinced that freedom, justice, sovereignty, and self-determination for Palestinians are the ultimate political determinants of health and foundations so that people can live dignified, meaningful, and flourishing lives. Research in the service of society, to return to our first principle on accountability, cannot compromise on the political determinants of health, as these inform the social determinants at very personal experiences of people's daily lives. We find that these 6 principles are critical to our work and in our own growth as scholars and researchers. We are well aware that these practices won't, as such, dismantle unequitable power structures in global North-South research or relations. We're not naive. They're so entrenched. Yet they are also not without consequences. To give you a few examples, they allow us to refuse certain funding schemes that do not allow us to work ethically. And this is not related necessarily to Israeli sort of funding schemes. It's just our UK-based funding that is just really colonial. It allows us to receive ethical and to demand that we receive ethical approval for our research from local universities, so from Birzeit in that case first, and only then from King's, to make sure that our research follows local ethical guidelines. It allows us to burn bridges with sometimes quite influential people, most recently Richard Horton from The Lancet, on his stance related to Gaza. So it is no longer the Lancet Palestinian Health Alliance, but the Palestinian Health Alliance. This relationship had to be broken. It refuses to signing on to contracts that include values we disagree with, such as the terrorism clause required by UK institutions when formalizing research partnerships. And believe me, this is a law. To refuse to sign takes each time many months until we can continue our research because we simply refuse. These principles also help us to hold ourselves accountable in our varied relationships, have proven to lead to higher quality research outputs that are both rigorous and reflective of local realities and needs, and have resulted in durable relationships that last beyond project funding cycles. So a commitment to these principles has meant making difficult decisions, but have ultimately allowed for more commitment and a sustained way of working over time, over a decade. So in closing, what I want to say is that BDS is vital, yes, but building equitable and ethical partnerships with those who are oppressed is of equal, if not greater, importance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hannah, and thank you so much to both of you.